Okay, great. Well, welcome to another episode of Account-Based Fridays. Megan and I have been co-hosting, gosh, I think for 6 to 9 months now. We've been having weekly conversations on all things account-based related. We've got a special guest today, Kristen Hamilton, who will give a formal introduction in a moment. Each week we open up with a poll, as the returning guests know, and for those that are new. And this week we asked about intent data and an ABM platform. The reason this question came up is we were talking to a couple CMOs over the last couple weeks, and two consecutive CMOs had shared with me their frustration that some of the information that was being unearthed by the ABM platforms were telling them what they already know. So I put it out to the people to ask for votes. Didn't get a ton of votes here, but interestingly enough, a good majority did get new insights, and I imagine their processes probably support that. But I don't know, Megan, what was your reaction to this poll?
Yeah, I would hope you're getting new insights. I mean, I think some of the things that intent data tells you aren't things you can get other places, right? It's information about what people are doing when they're not doing things with you. So I'm not a mind reader myself, so I presume that having intent data would be helpful to know what others are doing when they're not with you. And to me too, that there are also ways to know. I mean, if you're looking at intent data, right, you've got providers who can show you, here's how other people, other companies like you are investing in engaging your audience. Here's what your audience is responding to, both with you and not with you. And here's how you're investing. And you can start to see like really a great picture of the gaps. And then even down to literally where people are going and who they're interacting with can tell you a lot about the things they're not telling you directly. So yeah, I mean, I'm pleased to see this, but also not really surprised. I think the trick is, okay, so it's new insights. What are you doing with it? Right? How are you helping make it actionable for your sellers? How are you helping take action on it as a marketer? And how are you able to instrument some of your responses to those new things that you're seeing so that you can't do everything manually? How do you make it happen without that? But that's, yeah, I'm good. I would call this not particularly surprising, but probably good news in a way too. Yeah. I would love though, Kristen, we're so excited you're here. And I think this is actually kind of a perfect moment to introduce you, because I think you're thinking about just some of these things right now. Kristen is the CMO at Mineral Tree, which was recently acquired by Global Payments. And Kristen has been an amazing member of the B2B community with leadership at companies like Neolane, which for those who remember, that was actually one of the very, very best of the sort of earlier generation of marketing automation, acquired by Adobe. So no surprise, they have good taste. She was also CMO at eVariant, which is a healthcare patient acquisition and retention platform that was acquired by Healthgrades. So Kristen, I feel like you've been in kind of like three of the hottest markets in B2B, right? In between marketing automation and MarTech generally, then onto health tech, and now into fintech. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Yes. Like that's a pretty great
lucky record. All luck. No, there was no grand plan. So, if anybody's saying, wow, boy, you picked them good, there was no, just got a little lucky, I guess.
Well, still though, being in the right place at the right time means a lot. And also, you've been in marketing leadership at companies like Kronos and IDC. So you've really seen companies at all stages. And that makes me extra excited for you to share your wisdom in a couple of areas. And we've talked about sort of expectation setting and how do you get people away from the lead model and thinking about sort of the types of account-based marketing that makes sense. I would, though, love to open with maybe a little bit of a question related to what you just said, sort of your career path. I think one of the things that you've really been able to do is move from kind of more operationally driven marketing roles all the way to a really great marketing leadership position. What are some of the things that have helped you take advantage of being in the right place at the right time and really making those roles work?
Not been asked that question. That's a good one. I think earlier in my career, and I don't know if this has changed, but earlier in my career, people had counseled me to specialize in one area. And although, because they just thought that then you go very deep and you're considered an expert and that would get you further. and maybe it's just my personality. I don't like listening to people. My parents would probably say about me, but it was more just, I like to do a lot of different things. And so earlier in my career, I just kept trying different parts of marketing. And then I realized I made conscious choices to do that, so that when I did get to middle or later in my career, I actually can say I've done that, or I can really appreciate what it takes to do X, Y, and Z. For anybody who's had to, pack up the trade show booth and make sure that things don't get damaged, and people just don't appreciate sometimes how that stuff happens. Or, hey, yeah, can you just pull me that list out of Salesforce or build me that report? Like, oh, wait a minute, you can't join those tables in Salesforce. They don't know what they're asking. Okay, right. So for me, it was I just like to do a lot of different things. I did consciously take some roles. Like, I did start earlier in my career in product marketing, because I knew being in tech, you either had to sell or you had to be in product to have credibility. And I knew I didn't want to sell. So I actually started in product marketing and tech. So I think that would be the only real conscious one that I did. But besides that, it was just rounding myself out. And in terms of picking the companies, again, I wish I had a magic crystal ball back then, but reflecting on it, a lot of it is kind of size of the market. It's not just what's hot, but as an example, some companies just have a small total addressable market. And that's okay, because then you do get to do more ABM type things, but you have to be conscious of that going into it. So I know my latest company, Mineral Tree, where I am now, I wasn't looking, they found me, and it was, for me, I had been doing MarTech for such a long time, and it was fintech, and I knew that B2B payments were something that was going to be big because of what was going on the B2C side and what we all do today from a payment perspective. So that one was just paying attention a little bit to the market, and I got really lucky. I wish, we could pick just based on the people, because in my experience, it's always the people that make the difference. But you don't always know that going into situations. So I know there's a long-winded answer. I hope it kind of explains the circuitous route I have taken.
I think it's a great answer. And I'd love, let's sort of continue on that thought about one of the topics that we really wanted to cover today, which is around setting expectations. And I think, to your point, when you've had that experience of doing a lot of different jobs within marketing, and then you find yourself in a marketing leadership role, I think it must make it easier to be able to help say, is what's being asked of us realistic given what we're doing? But would love for your advice on thinking about, as a marketing leader, what are some of the things that you really pay attention to when you're trying to ensure that the expectations that you are being asked to meet, or that you are being asked to help set, are going to be something that you can achieve, but then also, provide the right amount of motivation for the team? Sort of, how do you balance those things?
Sure. One of the things that more recently I've been doing, and I think helps, is just overall for expectations are what will we do, and then also what we won't do. And it sounds different, but someone gave me this advice earlier. They said, that's very different than we should do this and we should do that. That's a billion things you can do versus what we will and we won't. And the plan that I put together for the year is like 5 or 6 slides, that's it. And most importantly, it's really about strategy and goals. It's not really tactics, because it's so fluid in marketing and it can change. What I do is I do that, and I also have a slide of what we're not going to do, because we just don't have the resources. And even when I've had the best budgets and the best resource at everything, there are always things you can't do. And it's really important. And I would say that of all things has helped so much. And what I do is I socialize those marketing slides with the entire leadership team in the beginning of the year. And I can't even tell you how many times it saves me. I'll give you an example. I was at one company where we were not doing vertical marketing, and they wanted vertical marketing, and going to vertical marketing. And oh, by the way, we want 6 verticals and you got to go deep and wide. I mean, think about it. That's content, that's demand gen. Think about the shows, just the shows alone, except for the pandemic, right? And so I said, okay, well, these are the resources we need. But by the way, we can go deep on 2 and we'll kind of go light on 4. And sure enough, all through the year, we kept getting asked, okay, how about this? Nope. I had another case where in the middle of the year, we were targeting mid-market, and middle of the year, we happened to bring on some sales reps that had really good enterprise experience, because just opportunistically, and it was the right thing to do. And it was, okay, now you need to go market to the enterprise. Well, we didn't get any more resources or budget. And sure enough, in my plan, it was, we're only doing this market. We're doing mid-market, US based. This is the ICP. And it's one of the things that, and I was just sharing this with someone, I literally just came up with this one, which is no one wants to say no, because I want to work on all those things. But one of the ways that I have found in terms of either setting expectations or prioritizing, and this is at the highest level, this is even as at metrics, just the highest level in terms of the work and the priorities, is pretend I'm the development team. Okay, here's our marketing roadmap, which is, by the way, the plan. And here's our team of developers. Okay, I've got this team. I am really happy for revenue opportunities for us to reevaluate the roadmap to see if something comes off, or if we push something, or should we hire more developers, marketing people. So just in terms of expectation setting, but one of the really big things in there also is kind of the metrics and the goals. And that is, and again, I'm talking 5 or 6 slides, very light, but the metrics and the expectation, if you're doing product-led growth versus regular growth, if you're doing demand versus ABM, it's not a one-size-fits-all. And the challenge that I'm sure other marketers have run into is there's just this addiction to leads, because that's what people know. And so as an example, this year I'm running both mid-market and enterprise. And for the enterprise, I've said, we're not going to have a funnel, just don't ask for it. Now, technically in my back pocket, I have one, because I only do that to size up resources and what I think it should look like, but I never publish it, never commit to it. It doesn't exist. You know, these are not the droids you were looking for, sort of thing. And we set the expectation of, this is how we're going to measure success. And of course, this has all been pre-negotiated with my sales leader and my product leader, kind of what I consider the triumvirate of the go-to-market, where we're like, okay, well, what's on the product roadmap that we need to support? Okay, sales, can you sell that? And marketing, can you market that? Okay, what does success look like? What does product need from us? What do we need from product? And all the way around. And I think it's really hard in January because everybody wants you in SaaS to put everything in the funnel. You're usually writing performance reviews. You're usually doing your budget, finishing the budget, right? You're trying to do the plan. I mean, Januaries are like, I've just decided this year, Januaries are the worst month for marketing people. Like I've decided. So you really have to force yourself the discipline. And in some cases, you have to educate and teach around account-based metrics at kind of more the account level than the lead level. And if I want to be clear, this is probably the 80-20 rule. I don't get it right all the time, and things change. And even if I do all the things that I think are right, sometimes things still don't work out. But I have found more often than not, just setting those expectations, educating, getting your triumvirate on the same page for how you're going to measure has tended to serve me well, and my teams, because they also feel like that not only are they aligned within marketing and I have their back, they know, the whole leadership team knows also. And I think it just garners this kind of respect, which I just think for marketing people, it goes such a long way. Well, anyway, and by the way, having been in those jobs myself, I know just someone who knows that when they ask for something, it might not be at the top of my list, but if I get it done, they're appreciative. I mean, just a really nice thank you sometimes goes a huge long way. I don't know if that helps on the expectation setting, and I could certainly go into more details in terms of how we look at the metrics and the tactics and things like that, but I didn't know if there were any questions on some of the expectation setting piece at the highest level.
I think you nailed it there with, I love the simplicity, especially around what you're not going to do. And I think that probably, at least in our consultancy business, it's almost a forcing function of really defining and making sure that the language that you're using is understood and shared by others. Something as simple, and you said a lot of great nuggets there, but something as simple as leads, that word may mean something very different to marketing than it does to an SDR or to sales. And maybe just double clicking on the word leads just for a moment, because you mentioned that amongst many great things there. It's interesting you bring up leads. What kind of, I notice in every company, they treat leads differently. Some are like, hey, we don't want to have anything to do with leads. Others embrace it. Almost contrary to, there are a couple vendors out there that are saying, oh, leads no more, including Megan. I think your old company might say that. I think it kind of varies by business model from what I see, but what's your business model? Are you guys using leads? Are you moving completely to accounts and contacts? How do you think of the world in your go-to-market motion?
We do both because of our motion. My total addressable market is 800,000 accounts. I go from companies that have 5 million in revenue to infinity. So a company with 5 million in revenue certainly doesn't buy like a company that's got 20 billion in revenue. And I say that very specifically, how they buy, not how we sell, right? Because I'm a big believer in, and I have to catch myself, it's about the buying process, which also is front-ended by consideration until the opportunity, right? We still use leads, and this is where I think about KPIs and metrics in what I call the strategic ones that I commit to the board and that the marketing team is measured on, and we have different ones that are interlocking. But then I have things that I call operational metrics, which is what I call running the business of doing marketing. And they're often leading indicators or little pieces of information to help me know if we're on track and we're going to meet the strategic ones. Let me give you an example. Awareness and share of voice, right? I will commit, when I started with MineralTree 18, 20 months ago, we were 4th in share of voice in the market. And I was like, yeah, no, that's not, yeah. I'm not competitive against people, but against companies, yeah, I got some issues, good issues, I think. And I wanted to be number 1. And so I have an external agency that I use. How am I going to tell them, okay, I just want to be number 1? And how do I know each quarter? How do I know if I'm on track? You can't keep measuring. We measure it every quarter, but you can't measure it every week. So all of a sudden, 13 weeks in your quarter has gone by. So I know that if I'm getting a certain number of press mentions and a certain number of bylines about, based on what I've seen in share of voice in the market, I know that I'm progressing. Leads are the same way. For the demand funnel, the waterfall side for my mid-market, where my sales cycle is very fast, something like 40 days, something like that. Leads are important because we're still getting net new accounts. So we are both looking at the person level and the account level. And we don't act on leads because we use lead scoring. And we make sure that we are only prioritizing for our SDRs and our account executives based on the scoring model made up of behavioral and demographic, which, marketing people know this stuff. So here's the other thing where leads personally help me significantly. And again, it's in the background. It's not something that I use, but I can just tell you based on a number, a revenue target I need to hit. I can back into, I'm going back and being old here, serious decisions, best practice through the funnel of a 1.2% conversion rate, just saying, to get to the number of deals I need to close based on my average selling price and velocity. I can figure out what marketing budget I need. And so if someone throws out a marketing budget to me, it's also when you're interviewing for jobs. How do you have context? What if someone tells you they're going to give you a $10 million budget? They sound good, but if you look at what you need to do to get to that, you can use some average cost per lead stuff to ballpark it. Now, it's not perfect. And even for the enterprise and for ABM, I just assume a much higher cost per lead per se. And it's just a really good swag and starting point to say, ooh, are we even in the ballpark, or are you out of your mind with that budget sort of thing? So again, I think it can more be one of those operational hints and clues that you use, but my team's not measured on it. We don't really talk about it. To be honest, with sales and with our product folks, we're talking about meetings that we book. And those only come out of scored marketing qualified leads. So we're more talking meetings and opportunities when we're having those conversations. They assume that marketing's dealing with that stuff.
Are you demonstrating the presence of marketing sort of along that journey to say, hey, I mean, the salesperson could say, I got that meeting, right? So how are you kind of pointing out the role of marketing and sort of the good stewardship of your budget in that context?
So for folks who are on the call or who might listen to this, who have a small total addressable market, I feel your pain. One of the companies I worked for, the full total addressable market was 300 accounts with an 18. Yeah, I know, John. Ooh. It's possible. And it shrunk almost weekly. Ooh. And by the way, an 18 to 24 month sales cycle, and it was sales cycle that was without consideration. And only 1/3 of those 300 were really in the market at a time buying.
Was this healthcare by chance?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Like a hospital system.
Hospital system
only has 300 accounts.
There was 326.
Right.
Not that I remember these things. But if you also embrace it of, wow, that's great. I've got 326 targets that I'm going to go after. In that case, and this is where I think the metrics are, this is so significant in setting expectations. And I kind of learned on this one, which is the deals are probably already sourced. If you're going to look at first touch source attribution, it's sourced, so don't bother. I mean, right? Unless you were there at the moment that the product is done, which usually isn't the case for a marketing leader, right? They usually have other people, the founder, co-founder, and they're selling. So the accounts are sourced, so you can't take credit. So what you need to do is set the expectation. And in that case, what I used were different metrics around engagement and coverage. And actually at the time, I was actually I called Megan up at the time. Was like, hey, I'm doing this ABM. She goes, wow, those are some good questions. And actually on the fly, she made some stuff up, which was really good. No, I'm kidding. So we're
Probably true.
Well, this was earlier on, and we were all trying to figure this out.
Yeah, there wasn't a good answer.
How
then.
much a touch or how much from an engagement.
Yeah.
And I've used different flavors where, to your point, Megan, you can do sales and marketing touches together, right, for engagement, to say it was, 50 touches across the buying cycle, of which marketing did this many. Here's another one that's really interesting. Looking at the engagement across the account before the opportunity was created and after. It was really interesting at eVariant. We found that 50% of the deals that we closed, the last touch was a webinar.
Oh, wow.
Right. I mean, and also like to share that, believe it or not, with a board member, right? You can't go into all the detail because board members, they just,
Right.
even the really, really good ones who might even have a strong go-to-market, they don't in the weeds, but they do understand from the marketing leader without having to say, oh, hey, we sourced all the deals. We have found that webinars are one of the best last touches in closing an opportunity. So we're going to be investing there. So that's where I think it helps. You also, so when you do that, you can show the engagement, and depending on either what your issues or opportunities are, sometimes it's all about getting the opportunity. So you want to show the number of touches. The other thing you might want to also do is it overall absolute, or are you comparing quarter to quarter, or are you comparing account-based to funnel? Right? So if you're running both, like I know a lot of people when they are measuring ABM, they're measuring campaigns in ABM compared to maybe each other, right? So this campaign worked good versus this one, which you need to do. But I also like to look at one account versus another, one campaign versus another. And then I also will, if I'm running also demand for so for my mid-market, I run more of a funnel. I'm comparing there also, and then I'm doing over time. So an example, am I growing the number of contacts per account from a coverage perspective every quarter? And then can I correlate that? What's the average number when a deal closes? Because then that becomes your target, right? If I close 5 deals and they all have had, I'm making this up, 17 contacts, or they all had 27 touches, that then becomes a good target or something to stretch for to get to. So there's ways, Megan, to your point, that it doesn't have to be what you sourced. I mean, we would call it influence. I just like to call it engagement. And I also like to make sure I have one metric that's joint with sales on that. So it's how we're doing it together, how many calls they're making, or by the way, did they get them to show up to the webinar, that we're the ones that actually did the webinar. I don't know if that helps, but that's how we look at it.
Oh, it helps for sure. I think that's really important. And I think increasingly important in our, in now a remote digital asynchronous, sort of combo package hybrid sales experience world, right? If you're not looking at it that way, you will not have the full equation that gets you to success. And both sides have to respect what each brings to the table. To your point, right? If I'm a seller and I go the extra mile to make sure, hey, I'm setting reminders for everybody who signed up for this webinar. And every time I'm on a call with a customer, I'm going to remind them, hey, don't forget, we've got this great webinar. And then suddenly you're seeing an increase in that close rate, right? Because you got more people getting to that webinar that pushes them over the edge to say yes. Wow. That's a powerful combination. Either one without the other wouldn't be successful. Or as successful.
I'll be honest, I've tried in general and not just in more of the account based.
Yeah.
My last few roles, I've consciously stayed away from sourcing as a conversation. And I kind of have an agreement with my sales leaders. I said, let's not do that. Let's win together or lose together. And by the way, if you're having an issue with that, let's you and I talk about it. Let's not let that creep in to our teams at all. Like, let's just not, you and I can have a knockdown drag out anytime. And it's really because it gets toxic. And so I've been doing that. And I also think that sales leaders have also matured like marketing leaders have. And I hear a lot less of that. I would say in like the last 3-4 years of us versus them and source and info. I'm hearing a lot. I think everybody's maturing more around, it takes a village to close deals. So I think that's goodness and that's progress. Yeah, sure. I'm sure there's still pockets, but I just try to stay like we do first touch. We do multi-touch attribution. We run 3 models. We do multi-touch. We do first source at the account level, and then we do first source at the opportunity. But we don't share it with anybody. We keep it on the marketing team.
Are you making decisions off of that? You get that information. You're then making your marketing decisions based on that data?
Correct. And we also know that it's not perfect, even though I feel so spoiled. I mean, I joined my current company and within 2 weeks, I had all that information and really could automatically identify what we needed to do and not do. And I mean, sometimes you never get that after years at a company. I can't tell you. I really think that it has really made the difference in our success. Like I'll pinch myself that to have that, but to also know that it's never perfect. But part of why we don't share it is, again, and we source a lot in marketing here, a lot. But it's not, we don't want to have that conversation, much like I don't want a sales leader saying, oh, well, you're not sourcing anything in businesses where marketing can't or isn't for whatever reason. So we just kind of keep it to ourselves to make decisions. And we're tracking kind of progress and our ROI. And one of the things we look at is how much we spend across what it generates. And it kind of tells us, it helps a lot with the marketing mix. And also looking at source versus multi-touch also tells you, because sourcing is more expensive, acquiring new versus nurturing, that also helps us to limit to the sources we know work as sources because they're so expensive, and then try to go for nurturing using those sources that are less expensive at a cost per acquisition. So that's what we use it for.
Makes a ton of sense. Gosh, there was so much to dive into, and just keeping an eye on time here. I could ask a bunch of different questions, but maybe just one simple question or last question from me. When you're looking at that analysis, do you have a person manually gathering that information? Because I've got to believe that a lot of that's not automated, or is a person building something to automate that kind of capture of information?
We have, I would say, most of it automated, which we're really lucky. I mean, we're incredibly lucky. I will tell you, we did use a tool for attribution prior that, we were very happy with, but we figured out that because we had such good data in Salesforce, and by the way, a really good relationship with our finance team, to make sure that we were capturing in Salesforce the stuff we would need to do it. And even our product people too, right? Because from a product catalog, making sure that when people sign contracts, they picked the right products and they showed up in the right ARR so we can do the ROI stuff. But we were spending money on a tool, and we were looking to save money and reduce tools, because that feels like a pendulum always. Ooh, I want to cut tools. Oh, I need another tool. And I fall in that camp. And because I know tools aren't the answer, but tools are the answer, right? I go back and forth. But so we do it out of Salesforce with some manual intervention and just double checking some things with our finance team to make sure we're not totally out of whack. But we're very spoiled. And I will tell you though, I've only been at one other company where we've been able to do this level of attribution through Salesforce, because it's nobody's fault. It's just the inherent nature. There are attribution tools out there, which I think gets you 80 or 90% of the way. Because I know that's some of the complaint from B2B marketers sometimes, but listen, the 80 or 90% is a lot compared to 0% to give you directional data to make good decisions.
Well, I think that is a lovely thought to close on, because I couldn't agree more, right? Some data is better than no data, and some data that you use is better than a ton of data you don't. So
and data that you have the right expectations around, right? You know, if you have partial data and you're trying to draw conclusions, you know, you can get yourself into trouble. But if, you know, just like I said, even the attribution that our data we feel pretty good about, we're not going to go out and publish it, not just because we don't want to, you know, say us versus them, but also it's not perfect. So as long as you know that, and by the way, the other thing is, even if it's not perfect, if you start doing 1 quarter, 2 quarter, 3 quarter, 4 quarter, your absolute number in a way doesn't matter if you're not sharing. If you're just using it for your own, you then can see trends over time on a baseline. So that's the other way to think about it.
Yeah. Well, Kristen, thank you so much for taking time with us today
and
for sharing
great on a snowy
small
Friday.
portion of what you know. Yes.
Yeah.
Great. And
Thanks
next
for having me.
week, we have another special guest, Megan Marilyn from your.
Yes. Yeah. So we have the CMO from Club Essential Holdings, which has kind of a variety of subsidiaries, and Marilyn has done some really super interesting work. And she, like you, Kristen, I think has had very strong kind of operations background, and that's propelled her into, you know, the C-suite, and has really helped her to take kind of a data-driven view of marketing. And she's going to share with us a little bit about her journey, which continues to evolve, but also kind of learn a little bit about her role and how she's approaching things in a kind of a B2B2C world. So should be super interesting. And fun fact about Marilyn too, is that one of her past roles was being a marketing leader for the B2B division of the Second City, which does training, which is super interesting. So yeah, working in essentially a comedy troupe, right? as a marketing operations person and a marketing leader, I can't